The trial of Pope Formosus, also known as the Cadaver Synod, stands as one of the most bizarre and macabre events in the history of the Catholic Church. Held in 897, this posthumous trial saw the disinterred corpse of Pope Formosus, dressed in papal vestments, placed on a throne and subjected to a judicial process. To understand the trial of Pope Formosus, it is essential to consider the tumultuous political and ecclesiastical landscape of the late 9th century. The period was marked by intense power struggles, both within the Church and between the papacy and secular rulers. Pope Formosus, who reigned from 891 to 896, was a key figure in these conflicts. Formosus, originally the Bishop of Porto, had a complex and controversial career before becoming pope. He was involved in the politics of the Carolingian Empire and supported various claimants to the imperial throne, notably Arnulf of Carinthia. This political maneuvering earned him enemies, including Guy III of Spoleto and his son Lambert, who were also contenders for the imperial crown. Formosus's alignment with Arnulf alienated the Spoletan faction, setting the stage for future reprisals. The charges against Formosus were rooted in accusations of perjury, violating canon law, and aspiring to the papacy while holding the position of bishop, which was forbidden at the time. Although these accusations were politically motivated, they provided a veneer of legitimacy to his prosecution. After Formosus's death in 896, his enemies seized the opportunity to exact revenge. The Cadaver Synod, convened by Pope Stephen VI, who was closely aligned with the Spoletan faction, took place in January 897. The trial was an unprecedented and grotesque spectacle designed to humiliate Formosus and invalidate his papacy. Formosus's corpse was exhumed, dressed in papal vestments, and seated on a throne in the Lateran Basilica. A deacon was appointed to speak on behalf of the deceased pope, who was accused of violating church law and coveting the papal throne. The sight of a decaying corpse being tried for alleged crimes shocked contemporaries and remains a disturbing image in church history. Unsurprisingly, Formosus was found guilty. The synod decreed that all his acts and ordinations were null and void. His papal vestments were torn from his body, the 3 fingers used in consecrations were cut off, and his remains were thrown into the Tiber River. This extreme degradation was intended to erase his legacy and discredit his supporters. The Cadaver Synod was driven by a combination of political vengeance, ecclesiastical rivalry, and the desire to consolidate power. Several key factors contributed to the trial. The primary motive behind the trial was political retribution. Pope Stephen VI and the Spoletan faction sought to punish Formosus posthumously for his support of Arnulf of Carinthia and his opposition to the Spoletan claim to the imperial throne. By desecrating Formosus's memory, Stephen aimed to undermine his supporters and strengthen his own political position. The trial also reflected deep ecclesiastical rivalries within the church. Formosus had accumulated numerous enemies during his career, both for his political alliances and his actions as bishop and pope. The Cadaver Synod was an opportunity for his ecclesiastical opponents to settle scores and delegitimize his papacy. Pope Stephen VII likely sought to assert his authority by staging the trial. In an era when the papacy was embroiled in political conflicts, demonstrating the power to condemn a predecessor, even posthumously, was a means of consolidating authority. This assertion of power, however, had the opposite effect, leading to widespread scandal and outrage. The Cadaver Synod had profound and lasting consequences for the papacy and the broader church. The event not only highlighted the depths of political and ecclesiastical corruption, but also prompted significant changes in church practices and attitudes. The grotesque nature of the trial scandalized contemporaries and damaged the reputation of the papacy. The sight of a pope's corpse being desecrated horrified many and eroded the moral authority of the church. This scandal contributed to a period of instability and further weakened the papal office. The immediate aftermath of the Cadaver Synod saw a backlash against Pope Stephen. Later that same year, he was deposed and imprisoned, where he eventually met his death, possibly by strangulation. His successor, Pope Romanus, annulled the Cadaver Synod's decisions, and Pope Theodore II reburied Formosus with honor. Pope John IX, 898–900, convened synods that condemned the Cadaver Synod and prohibited future trials of deceased persons. The shocking events of the Cadaver Synod highlighted the need for reform within the Church. The trial underscored the dangers of political interference in ecclesiastical matters and the need for clearer regulations regarding papal succession and the treatment of deceased popes. While significant reforms would not take place until the Gregorian reforms of the 11th century, the Cadaver Synod served as a cautionary tale about the perils of political and ecclesiastical corruption. In the long term, the Cadaver Synod contributed to a more cautious and regulated approach to papal authority and succession. The scandal emphasized the importance of maintaining the dignity and integrity of the papal office, leading to stricter protocols and greater efforts to insulate the papacy from secular political machinations. The trial of Pope Formosus, or the Cadaver Synod, remains one of the most extraordinary and disturbing episodes in the history of the Catholic Church. Driven by political vendettas and ecclesiastical rivalries, the trial not only sought to disgrace a deceased pope but also expose the depths of corruption and factionalism within the Church. The subsequent outrage and reform efforts highlighted the need for greater integrity and stability within the papal office. While the Cadaver Synod stands as a dark chapter in Church history, its legacy ultimately contributed to a more regulated and dignified approach to papal governance.